Okay, hey baby, this daddy. Got you a book, Sleeping Beauty. Here you go, you can't see it. I'm going to read you the first story tonight. Read you this one, then I'll record another one for you this week as well. I really miss you, love you. Give yourself a big kiss and hug for me. Okay. Alright, the story is Sleeping Beauty. Just like you're a very beautiful young lady. I'm going to grow into be a great young woman. Okay. And let's get started on the story. Okay, there once were a king and queen who seemed to have everything anyone could wish for. They lived in a beautiful palace and ruled over a happy country where all their subjects loved them dearly. But there was one thing that made the king and queen very sad indeed. They had no children. One morning, as the king was looking over some documents with his courtiers, the queen suddenly burst in. "My dear," she said breathlessly, "I have great news." "And what might that be, my love?" asked the king. "I'm going to have a baby," exclaimed the queen excitedly. The king was so delighted he dropped his mouth, burst into tears, and gave his wife a great big hug. A few months later, the queen gave birth to a little girl, and she was the prettiest baby anyone had ever seen, just like you. And now it was when y'all were born. Y'all were very beautiful. She had big brown eyes, lovely hair, and a perfect smile. The king was so taken with his child, he ordered a national holiday on the day she was born. He and the queen adored their new daughter and spent hours gazing lovely at her. "She's as beautiful as you, my dear," said the king fondly to the queen. "I'm sure she'll grow up to be as wise as you." The queen replied, "Thank you, my love. How blessed we are," said the king. Let's see, there go the picture. Okay. The king decided to hold a huge christening party for their new princess. "I invited people from far away. When the day came, everyone in the palace was excited. The cooks had been up all night preparing delicious food, and the gardeners had been working for weeks to make the palace grounds look perfect. The king and queen also invited 6 fairies to the christening party, whom they hoped would bestow special gifts on the new princess. One by one they approached her crib. "I bestow beauty on you," said the first fairy, gazing fondly down at the gurgling princess. "Joy," said the second. "Wisdom," said the third. "To be generous," said the fourth. "Health," said the fifth. But before the sixth fairy could bestow her gifts, the doors of the great chamber were suddenly flung open. Who could that be? There stood an old, ugly fairy that no one really liked and were secretly a little afraid of. "Why wasn't I invited to your party?" the old fairy asked, glaring at the king. "Well, I'm not quite sure," stuttered the king. Looking down at his shoes, feeling embarrassed, everyone fell asleep. "I have a gift I'd like to bestow on your dear child," said the old fairy, walking up to the crib and looking down at the princess. "My gift to you," she began, "is that when you reach the age of 16, you will prick yourself on the spindle of a spinning wheel and you will die." Wow, that's not nice, huh, McKenna? That's real mean of the old fairy. And with that, she turned around and walked angrily out of the palace. The door, the poor queen burst into tears. Then a lovely, clear voice rang out. It was the sixth fairy. "I haven't bestowed my gift yet," she said. "I cannot undo the terrible curse of the old fairy, but I can change it a little. My gift to you, little one, is that you won't die if you prick your finger on the spindle, but instead you will sleep for 100 years. From that day on, the king banned all the use of spinning wheels. If people wanted any wool to be spun, they had to send it to another land." Time passed, and everyone started to forget the old fairy and her curse. The princess grew up to be beautiful, healthy, wise, and generous, and everyone in the country loved her. So there go the picture. That one. Okay. On her 16th birthday, the king gave a grand party. For a present, he had a beautiful dress made for her. It was the first proper grown-up dress the queen had ever worn. It was a lovely green silk dress with an elegant high collar and was so long it reached the floor. The princess invited all her friends to the party. After eating a huge birthday lunch, they decided to play hide and seek. "You won't catch me," said the princess, running quickly away. Trying to find a place where nobody could find her, she climbed a stone staircase to the very top of one of the palace towers. At the top was a small room where an old lady sat at her spinning wheel. She had been there for years. "How nice to see you, my dear," said the old lady with a warm smile. "What beautiful thread you are making," exclaimed the princess. "May I try spinning the wheel?" She sat down at the wheel and began to spin, but as soon as she did so, the spindle pricked her finger. With a small cry, she fell to the ground and fell fast asleep. At that very moment, everyone else in the palace grounds fell asleep too. Many years went by, and little by little, a huge thorn hedge grew around the palace. It was so thick that few people who tried to fight their way through gave up. In time, the palace and the people and the sleeping people in it were completely forgotten. Then one day, a prince from a far-off land rode by and saw one of the palace's gleaming towers in the distance. In a nearby village, he asked if anybody knew to whom it belonged, but nobody did. It was too long ago. Then a very old man said his grandfather had told him that many years ago the palace had stood there, but no one had been able to cut through the thorn hedge to get to it. This story made the prince curious, and he decided to try to cut through the dense hedge. He took out his sword and started to hack his way through the thorns. Without warning, the thorn bush suddenly fell back and cleared a path for him right up to the palace itself. To his great surprise, the prince saw people draped all over the grounds. They all seemed to be sleeping. The prince warily made his way into the palace. It was exactly the same inside. People everywhere, and they were all fast asleep. Treading carefully, the prince slowly had made his way up the grand staircase, passing sleeping people as he went. See, look, that's the area. There go the prince, and then one of the guards knocked out sleep. All right. At the top of the stairs was a large oak door. He pushed it open and couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him lay a lovely princess who was also sound asleep. She was so beautiful he gasped out loud. In one swift movement, the princess knelt by her side and kissed her gently on the lips. To his utter astonishment, her eyes slowly opened and she began to awake. The prince looked into her deep blue eyes and realized she was the girl he had been waiting for all his life. At that moment, everyone else in the palace woke up too. It was exactly 100 years since the old fairy had cast her evil curse. The prince and the princess decided to marry. The palace was cleaned of the cobwebs, and their wedding took place soon after. It was a joyous day for everyone, and the prince and princess lived happily ever after. See? And that's the end of the story. And I will read you another story tomorrow. The next story is going to be The Six Swans. Okay? Alright, and Daddy love you. I miss you. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I will see you soon. There you go. Love you, baby. Bye-bye, and good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Love you.